Hey, that's pretty bad. Usually losing to the Celtics is not such a big deal. I remember I felt fairly confident slash maybe a little bit optimistic after they lost a close game in their in-season tournament game against the Celtics, but the Raptors losing 120 to 118 tonight, I thought was fairly disappointing, mostly because Jason Tatum didn't play, Kristaps Porzingis didn't play, and neither did Al Horford. It was, I was talking to my brother as we were watching it, and I wondered, like, is this a B team? And he pushed back. He's like, no, Jaylen Brown, Derek White are still playing, but it certainly isn't the A team, maybe the B plus team or whatever. It's a tough one to take. You get like a 5 of 19 shooting night from Derek White. You get 5 of 15 from Drew Holiday. Overall, like, you held a lot of their main engines of offense to not so great performances. And then Jaylen Brown, of course, like, he goes 5 for 6 from downtown. He finishes with 31, 10, and 6, looking kind of like a Scotty Barnes stat line. And Luke Cornett going for 28 and 3 with 3 blocks. Tough. Once again, kind of addressing this thing that keeps happening is that Jakob Poeltl played less than 25 minutes. This is a recurring theme in these games. The Raptors' best lineup over the course of this game was with Jakob Poeltl out, with Gary Trent Jr. out, and with Dennis Schröder. And crazily enough, Jalen McDaniels stepping in at the front court position. Now, because Jalen and Scotty and Pascal are all playing, like, I don't know, you know, on aggregate, they're all trying to, approximate somewhat of a center. And it's tough, man. It's tough. Jakob, you want him, we talked about this a few games before, actually in a lot of games so far this season. You want him to be an all-the-time player, like a no-matter-what player. And as far as being able to be on the court, be a really valuable player in like almost any context, that really hasn't been the case. And that's maybe the most disappointing part about these games, even as they play teams close, even as they do find good basketball for pockets and parts of the game, especially down the stretch. I thought the defense was tremendous. To quote Simon, the first comment on this live stream from Simon is, we almost had the Jalen McDaniels game. We very nearly did. And that would have been fun and that would have been exciting. But more so than that, we just keep never having the Jakob Poeltl game. And we keep having, of course, the Scotty Barnes game repeatedly over and over and over, which is a ton of fun. And that's worth the price of admission for a whole bunch of people. 30 for Scotty, 10 boards, 5 assists. Pascal also with 27, 5, and 5, 2 steals. Pascal, the assist numbers could have ballooned up a lot easier in this one too. And Dennis Schröder coming off the bench for 15 and 9. He was a +2. He was part of that lineup we talked about that got back into the game. I think they were a +16 over their minutes. Huge run. Maybe an 18-3 run they made in that fourth quarter. Get back into this thing. And OG, less usage in this game than maybe I would have expected, since the Raptors seem to be, at least by what they're succeeding at this part of the season, Pascal's been playing pretty good. Scotty, I think, has been unbelievable, evidenced by his stat line tonight. And Pascal, like, you don't snort in derision. You don't turn your nose up at 27, 5, and 5 either, especially when it comes on 55% shooting, 40% from downtown, right? They're in transition to becoming a more wing-oriented team, which I think is positive for this season, which I think is positive for the guys on the roster. And I think that's emblematic of Scotty and Pascal's ballooning stat lines. Even as they lose games, it's tough, these ones. Very difficult. Having Scotty and Pascal see more of the ball, I think, is great. Pretty crazy in this game to see Scotty hoist up 15 threes. I honestly don't think you want Scotty shooting that many. I wish it was more equitable between Pascal and Scotty over the course of this season, in that Pascal, I hope, has more of a return to normalcy as a three-point shooter, so that there's a couple more games this season where Pascal, on a good night, goes north of like 6-7 attempts from three, as Scotty tries to like work and grind out in the middle of the paint. Currently, they have a fairly complementary situation where Scotty is a really good three-point shooter this season and probably into the future. He's shooting 39%. He hit 7 triples tonight. Pascal is by far the Raptors' best two-point scorer. that has actually led to them being kind of symbiotic, kind of harmonious. For Scotty's growth as a 2-point scorer, that partnership needs to change if it's a partnership that happens in the future. Obviously, tomorrow, December 30th, is a big day as far as Pascal's contract and deadline. But at least in this game and in many games recently, they've found, I think, a harmonious partnership, which if the Raptors brass are considering anything, if anybody's sending that extension out, if anything is working like that, maybe that's something to consider. The Raptors, maybe the most disappointing part of this game, the defense. I wondered, because I was a proponent prior to the season, I wondered what the Raptors, a proponent of this starting lineup, I should say. I wondered also what they would look like at the point of attack. That was obviously something that the team, the front office, the coaching staff has been wondering about. And it's something they've struggled with immensely in these past couple games. Undone by Jordan Poole for a time is not good. You should not also be undone by Jaylen Brown and Derek White and Drew Holiday. And I think that the Raptors early on in this game really struggled with their point of attack defense. The Celtics were continuously able to get into the middle of the paint, punch gaps, find shooters on the outside, and the Raptors kind of spreading themselves thin, trying to cover the court and doing it slowly, not very effectively. And even when they did do it well, giving up heaps and heaps of offensive rebounds, like the offensive rebounds, Luke Cornett gets 5. Peyton Pritchard had 3, man. Part of that is the result of playing some zone to try and throw a different look at, I don't know, throw a different look at the Celtics, make them do a few different things defensively. And they did succeed. Like when you look at this game, I don't think, you look at, as I talked about at the start, some of their main engines of offense weren't very good in this game. And they had trouble scoring against the Raptors. And getting Derek White to throw up 10 triples and only hit 2 of them, I think is a win as far as game planning, as far as how your scheme affects the other team. He did hit a big 3 late. Not everything's a win. It's tough, man. I know I say that a lot in these podcasts. Simon has an interesting thought. He says it seemed like Scotty was too tired to defend the rim in the fourth quarter, didn't bother to jump for some shots he would crush earlier in the game. It's too much load if Jakob doesn't play enough. Yeah, I get what you mean, that Scotty can't be everywhere, everything everywhere all at once, and that it is a lot to ask Scotty to kind of step into the center role. It's tough, and we've kind of seen that happen even in a season where the Raptors won 48 games, that we saw a guy like Pascal really wear down over time when he was asked to step into the center role more often for the benefit of the offense and for the, let's say, versatility, or at least, what they called versatility of the defense. It was really hard on him, and Pascal has had 3 large injuries over the past, handful of years, and he's played like the most minutes. And I think we've seen a significant effect on his defensive intensity, defensive impact over the last couple of years too, as a result of that. And asking Scotty to carry that much of a load, like, hey, you're going to have heaps and heaps of possessions on offense. We're going to ask you to do a million different things defensively. And for like long stretches at a time, we need you to hold down the paint. If you have to ask Scotty to do that much stuff, that's like a mismanagement of assets. And, maybe it's not fair because Jakob hasn't been good enough Jakob hasn't been good enough to make the Raptors say, that's our center all the time. He's going like 28 minutes and above unless there's a crazy, crazy matchup that we can take advantage of. They did in this game, and congrats to them for that. And they had a really nice run. Darko pulled the right lever. Jalen McDaniels and Scotty and Pascal as the front court did work out. But having like these long minutes for Scotty, where he plays like 38 minutes in this game, Pascal plays 40, OG plays 37. These guys are asked to lock down front courts and hold down the glass. It's a big ask, and especially over the course of the season with Jakob in a lot of games recently. It's not just that he's not finishing the game. He's also not playing some of the minutes or slots in the game that he used to. And that's one of those things that, like, Jakob, a first round pick, 2 seconds, 4 years, 80 million. You gave a lot to get him. You gave a lot to keep him. he has to be part of these games. He has to be a sticking point. And this game, I thought he had some really nice footwork on the inside as far as like finishing. I thought that he was used like his footwork is tremendous, like on the catch, hold the pivot, but step forward, still hang the pivot, then use the dribble. Like he's always had that sluice step in the middle of the paint that I've been in love with forever. He was able to out nimble Luke Cornett a few times, but he wasn't. And it's kind of, it's symbiotic in the sense that the point of attack defense is really going to hurt Poeltl more than anybody because he's not as mobile as Scotty to get into a switching scheme. For example, when Scotty's playing center, the Raptors are going to be switching a bunch of stuff. Jakob is not going to be asked to do that. So the point of attack defense being worse hurts a Jakob center more than it does a Scotty center because you're not going to switch to negate that. And Jakob has not had a ton of support at the point of attack to help him in the middle of the defense, but he's also not really been bossing the middle of the defense either. Like I think in this game, offensively, I think he did fine as a hub, made a couple nice plays as a passer, but when you look at how the Celtics attack, he was just out of this game. The Raptors couldn't defend in scheme with him. And you give up a lot for a guy who doesn't defend across all the schemes you want to. ND says, quote, I still think the Precious erasure is insane. Yeah. This is what Darko talked about to some degree, right? Like he had mentioned that if you change the starting lineup, he thinks that there's going to be cascading effects across the rest of the rotation. There was and has been the last couple games. Precious with 2 minutes, to me, just not really okay. I still think Precious is a player who should be part of the Raptors' future plans. His potential should be a consideration. His playtime should be a consideration. And the Raptors have found really strong stretches so far this season. Even the last time they played the Celtics, right? Who closed that game for the most part? Precious, because they were switching across a lot of actions. And that wasn't the, Porzingis-less, Horford-less, Tatumless Celtics that the Raptors were hanging in against, that Precious was helping be a stalwart part of the defense for. It was the guys were there. It was the full-blooded team, man. They were doing it, and Precious stepped in, and he was great. And Precious in this game to just get 2 minutes, pretty crazy. But like, also you get 13 points in 15 minutes from Jalen McDaniels. That was obviously the right decision tonight. But like in the first half, I wondered against, the Wizards too, like, where does Precious fit in here? Because it has been important, or it is important going forward for Precious to fit in. I guess we'll keep it, we're talking kind of big picture stuff a little bit, but to take it back into the scope of the game, we can pay attention to the last few minutes, I suppose. For one, Scotty banging a triple, that was a super huge deal. Maybe some people are hung up on the missed layup at the end. I thought that Scotty had room for one more dribble. And that's a huge deal on drives. A lot of players, it takes like years and years for them to figure out, like, do I stall my dribble, see, hesitate, see how the defense is responding, use the extra dribble? Do I pick up early to get the defense to jump earlier so that I become a playmaker on this play? What am I trying to do going to the basket? And I think that he picked up the dribble too early and tried to get to the basket, and there were good contests from the Celtics. Scotty, who has tremendous touch, missed one at the bucket. Scotty turned the corner. They ran the ghost pick and roll, the small, the inverted one. Dennis runs over. He ghosts it. Scotty turns the corner going left. Good handle with the left hand, going downhill. I think that's what you want. And I think that Scotty will make better decisions going forward. And it's a simple play call, something that they can go to as often as they want. And I have no qualms about that being, what they did at the end. As far as like Pascal splitting the free throws at the end, I know he missed a free throw with maybe like 4 minutes left. He split 1 for 2. And I think, down the stretch, he had to miss the free throw. They had to try for it, but the ball didn't bounce where they needed it to. And that was the game. There were a couple possessions, obviously, you don't want to turn your nose up at it because like Jalen McDaniels did hit a 3. He also airballed one, but he did hit one, and 1 for 2 is good. And there were a couple possessions where I think this falls on Dennis's shoulders, who I think for the most part over the past 2 games, his decision-making his passivity at times have been benefits to the Raptors as far as how they want to play these games and as far as what they want to do down the stretch. Like, but also in this game, Dennis was able to turn the corner. He unfortunately split the free throws. And that's the thing too, is like these late game things, there's been a handful of games in the clutch time where Dennis has been able to turn the corner on bigs. And I think like if you can turn the corner, good things happen. But the thing with Dennis that makes it tough, especially relative to his decision making, is that Dennis turns the corner, but he doesn't necessarily bring help. He's a small guy. I know a lot of people before he signed with the team or right after he signed with the team thought that, because he is athletic and certainly more so than Fred, that he was a much better finisher. But Fred and Dennis have been, comparable finishers for years. And when Dennis turns the corner, typically he doesn't get a whole bunch of rotation, especially late in the game. What happens usually is he gets chase from the big, and we saw he got fouled by Cornette. Really, really quiet foul on that one. And that's tough for a guard, is like you get the step on your man, you see the rim in front of you, there's no help coming. Can you get the ball to the glass fast enough? And I hope that Dennis realizes that he's not often getting the ball to the glass fast enough. We've seen this in clutch time fairly often enough. It isn't enough just to beat your man. You have to have those considerations for when you get to the bucket. Are you going to be able to get that thing up? And Dennis, maybe not often enough. And if the help does come, then there's no shot he's making that. And he could be like on his last step with a dead dribble, and he might be like making a jump pass against a team that's swarming and trying to hawk on those passes out to the corner sometimes. So a Dennis drive is not really what you're looking for late in games. And I think he has to realize, I'm sure he does to some degree. I'm sure the coaching staff talks to him about it, that just because you get the step doesn't mean we're winning in that possession. Just because you get the step, maybe you can shift the defense ever so slightly, but try and find Scotty or Pascal to center the possession around them. There were some wins, with Dennis or with McDaniels late in the game, and especially McDaniels at the start of the fourth quarter. He scored like 10 points in like a half a second. But down the stretch, I think you really want to find Pascal and Scotty. And it really has to be that way. Dennis, the 3-point shot has been better the last couple games. Try and just hone in on that a little bit more. But it's tough, man. I think that's my third time saying that in this podcast, maybe my 80th time this season. But it is tough. The Raptors continue to change some things, continue to fail at many, and against underwhelming competition this year. I would have liked to see them go to Pascal and Scotty more late. And maybe it is possible that this game ends differently, but also Scotty didn't make it when he had the chance. Maybe he'll probably make some of those in the future. And he also hit a big three. So you win some, you lose some. That's just kind of how these things turn out. Over the course of the game, I think offensively that the Raptors had a really good sense of what they wanted to do. I think that especially against this Celtics team, maybe they didn't go to Siakam often enough when he was really in the pocket. And, it wasn't like Siakam was in the game when Scotty started taking over. Scotty started taking over when Pascal was out. And then they kind of adjusted accordingly down the stretch. I think that this team maybe needs to have a little bit better of a feel for Scotty and Pascal taking off, even though that sounds maybe crazy for a pairing who combined for 57 points, 10 assists. But these are two fantastic wing players. Like Scotty, I reckon, will be an all-star. I don't think Pascal makes it this year. If Pascal was having a more normal three-point shooting season, if the Raptors were good, I think you could have a case for both of them. But with the Raptors being this bad, I think it's definitely just Scotty. And I think Scotty is good enough this season, and his numbers are big and loud enough that he'll definitely, like, he has to be in the running. I think he's a no-brainer, not as a starter, but I think he's a no-brainer off the bench in the All-Star game. And this game is just another vote in that direction. Scotty in this game, I think, is once again very special, and not necessarily in the way that everyone expects him to be. This is one of the unique aspects of Scotty, is that some games, like December 10th, 2021, he bosses the Knicks in a game where, neither team clears 95, I don't think. And he plays like drop defense and he's in a roaming position and he has like a holy smokes amount of rebounds and he does it on defense. And we saw games this year where he does it on defense. We've seen playoff games where he does it as a driver and like a shot maker in the short mid range. We've seen him dominate games in like a multivariate way. It could be a different thing in a lot of different nights. And he's starting to give you a handful of those things every night. In this game, sure, he unloads 15 triples. And I think everybody wants him going to the basket a little bit more often. 20, what is it, like 75% of his attempts being from three isn't necessarily the best thing. But the Celtics, they really pack the paint. The Raptors, when they drive and kick, the ball finding Scotty for a 3-point shot attempt, that's good. The fact that he can hit 7 out of 15, that he's definitely over 39% on the season, that's great. I'm not mad that he can do a whole bunch of stuff. I just hope he keeps doing like a million different things and impressing. This game is just another, feather in his cap. It's yeah, Top Shot Tesla says Scotty blowing by Drew on the final play is encouraging. No, I don't think that was a blow by. Like it was a very rounded drive. Like Drew was on the hip. Scotty picked up really early, and that's how he got there. And Drew, obviously, when someone picks up early, you're not necessarily going to and they take off. You're not going to stay on their hip because you might, foul them. I think Drew was there for the most part, but I thought that the Scotty taking the corner, having like a tight handle with his left hand, should have used an extra dribble, but he was obviously worried about when the help was coming, how he wanted to utilize his downward momentum as a playmaker or as a scorer. I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I don't think this means that Scotty is all of a sudden like an explosive first step guy. Like Scotty took a very rounded drive, eventually got into his longer steps and started getting downhill. But taking longer to get to that point means that teams can just like throw a dig, force the pickup because you're not like you can beat your guy on a rounded drive, but you're not going to beat the help defense. That's why like John Morant, for example, like that wicked first step, he can beat the nail help. The like digging down won't matter because you're too late to dig down and force that early pickup, for example. So he'll get his last dribble below the free throw line, maybe. Scotty is probably going to get his above the free throw line because those digs will come. But just encouraging overall, Scotty is always encouraging this season and has been largely encouraging over the course of his career. I mean, even in his second season when there was a lot of conversation around his potential, his trajectory, all that kind of stuff, I thought, and I had written about and talked about ad nauseum last season, even in the doldrums of like November when Pascal was injured and they're losing to like the Pacers and OKC and Scotty and like they need the Delano Banton 27-point game against Detroit and Scotty's pretty passive. I think Scotty's ankle injury was like worse than what everybody was letting on. And I thought that Scotty was making significant strides as a playmaker. And I thought that his defense was getting better and better. And all that stuff is manifested on top of, one of the biggest 3-point jumps in NBA history. And that's not even like to say what Scotty's doing as a shooter is unprecedented, is not hyperbolic. Unprecedented. Crazy. I can't believe this guy shoots it like this. It's so cool. And he is also, yeah, there's guys who were labeled as shooters coming out of the game, like out of the college game. This isn't like a Grady joke, but there's like a handful, lots of guys who cannot clear 39% on north of 5 attempts a game. And Scotty's already doing it. And we know what was said about his jump shot for years and his scoring game for years. And he does it, man. Anna G asks, is it their plan to place their starts in horrible context to force developments in unexpected ways? Definitely not. That is not what they plan to do. Mugarbe Lenin says, it sounds like Scotty playing 1 versus 5. All I hear is Scotty, and he missed the clutch and could pass the ball to Pascal. Scotty is as far as like the future of the Raptors under, team control for contract, trajectory, potential, like anytime a franchise is kind of pivoting towards a young star, the coverage is going to surround them. Scotty having like 30, 10, and 5, and doing so in an unprecedented way, hitting his, career high in 3-point attempts. He's going to be like we talk about Scotty a bunch, and that's also what the fan base wants to hear too. But also like, you know, that's just kind of the way that is. Basketball conversations are typically polarized to a few players, and we're currently in the talking about Scotty part of the podcast for sure. But other guys, I see people asking about OG Anunoby. OG, I was a little disappointed in this game. I can understand why, because the Celtics, the reason why Scotty did so well is because he unloaded from three. Pascal is the best at working the middle of the court. Pascal got a bunch of his shots by working in the mid post. The place on the court that the Celtics are willing him to, like, saying, hey, you can settle in here. This is what our defense is going to allow. Scotty is, or sorry, Pascal is obviously the guy who can score efficiently from that point. He did so in this game. I thought he was fantastic as an offensive operator. And as far as, working in there, that's just Pascal. As far as like working in the middle of the court, Scotty's not going to be able to do that very often. You have to find the pacing. You have to see a lot of permutations of defensive rotations and stuff like that. And you have to work on a different type of bag. But OG, there's not really an expectation for him to like work the middle of the court. He is a Morey ball player a lot of the time, right? And he's at his worst, I think, when he's being forced middle with a bunch of help in the paint. And I think he's at his best when he has, a high volume of 3-point attempts available to him, and when he can crash into the paint with a live dribble and finish at the bucket. Just last game against the Wizards, there's been a handful of games this year where we see OG having a really good read for where the help side defense is coming from, attacking closeouts, being like a really vaunted driver. In this game, that obviously wasn't the case. I think he struggled. And this is the thing too, with a guy who doesn't have that counter in the middle of the floor, it's really easy to kind of turn the water off as far as volume goes. And OG is a guy who, depending on the scheme that the defense is playing, you can definitely slow down the volume. Pascal and Scotty, they can turn up the volume kind of according to how they want to play, if they're feeling passive or if they think there's something better on the floor. But OG in this game, I know a lot of people look at this and think 12 points, 2 assists, 2 rebounds is really quiet. It is. The defensive context plays a little bit into the volume. I think that OG did a decent job of playing within himself, but also I think that there was some playmaking opportunities that he missed out on. I think that his defense has been like taking a step back, as a lot of the Raptors have. And I think that you hope, because, and I think a lot of people ask these questions because they see OG's looming contract, where I think a lot of the assumption is that he'll be like 40 million and up or something like that per year. And the Raptors will obviously, if OG is on the team in the summer, they will be matching or whatever. Like they will be remiss to let OG walk for nothing. So when people see these games and see that OG's volume, some teams can turn the water off. Maybe that's where a lot of the, I guess, frustration comes from. But as far as like being the third option, I didn't think this game was too bad. But if you're thinking like potential into the future, where is OG as Scotty's running mate? I think you could look at this game and be disappointed at his lack of counters against the Celtics team that was decent as far as the fundamentals of their defense, but pretty light on game-changing defenders. And especially since OG isn't getting the best check, especially since he's not the highest up on the hierarchy of like scouting report, Pascal and Scotty, it's maybe a little bit disappointing. But I think he played within himself, especially offensively for the most part. But for the people who want more, I can't blame you. OG probably wants more for himself too, but some of that's going to come in the gym. And he's probably in the gym working on that stuff. It's really hard to turn a skill from just like a skill into an NBA skill, and then turning an NBA skill into an all the time NBA skill. is a whole bunch of different things. And the trajectory of it can be really different. Whereas like Scotty Barnes is a good example where he shoots 30% from three in his rookie season, 29% in his second season. Everyone says, oh, this is a really bad indicator. Scotty working on his game in the summer and working on, his workouts and his jumper, he was probably closer mechanically than the numbers indicated. All of a sudden this year, up to 39% on massive volume. So maybe OG is close to a breakthrough somewhere. I don't see any indication from that in the tape, but who knows? Players are able to add stuff to their game slowly all the time throughout their careers, but OG wasn't able to be an offensive game changer in this game. I think a lot of the first half of this game, he struggled defensively in a way that you're like, I really don't want to see this for him. And then he was obviously a focal point of the Raptors' switch heavy defense down the stretch. And that's kind of the situation. Nesta says OG is a luxury for a team that isn't built well like this current Raptor squad. I don't think we can sign him and expect fixes to what is broken. Probably not. The Raptors, they're missing a ton. They just because OG isn't a big time shot creator. OG isn't going to take a whole bunch of possessions and create good looks on offense. And he can guard a lot of guards, but he's mostly going to be deployed on wings and forwards and some big guards, I guess. The Raptors have the worst backcourt in the NBA, if not the worst, the second worst. And OG will never fix that aspect of it. The hope is that Scotty, through his unique style of playmaking that isn't very point guard like, but is certainly I create things, that he can help amalgamate a lot of the impact that a point guard has. And, in so the Raptors are able to find their way to, a unique style of offense and a unique style of defense because they play so big at the guard position. Like Scotty's been labeled as the shooting guard all year. I mean, tonight, NBA.com has him as the point guard. Gary is the shooting guard, right? So they're trying to find something there. But the Raptors, yeah, Coco says we still need a backcourt and more depth at center. I think it's kind of been interesting because the backcourt and the center position are so closely tied together because a lot of centers are their value is so intrinsically tied to a point guard. Maybe the best example is like Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert, right? Centers do not create looks for themselves like ever. You need a guy to put centers in winning positions. Wings are really like the preeminent scorers in the NBA a lot of the time. And the appeal of the wing is that they can typically they can score like a guard, like score the ball, not play make like guards. Guards are the only ones who play make like guards, but they can score like guards, and they can also like play in the middle of your defense at times on defense. They can give you really great court coverage on defense. They can help shrink the floor on defense. And in doing so, you can kind of meld the front court and back court together. You have a wing. That's why LeBron James and Kevin Durant, and like those guys were the biggest players for a time. But a lot of centers that aren't Joel Embiid and, Nikola Jokic, they are dependent on guards getting them the ball. And you can see it. Like Rudy Gobert does not have good chemistry really with Anthony Edwards, who is awesome, who scores the hell out of the ball, but he doesn't know how to put his bigs in positions to win. Scotty Barnes and Pascal Siakam are still trying to figure out how to put their big in a position to win. And that means that Jakob's, his impact went down from last season, going from, a lot of stuff with Fred. And I know the fan base has its opinions on Fred, but Fred's impact spoke for itself. And, they made the decision, Fred made the decision to go elsewhere. And it has affected Jakob's role on this team a bunch. It has been really, really tough to see Jakob's role change, to see the stuff they miss out on by not having like good guard play. And yeah, Nesta says, how does it make a lot of sense to pay for two expensive assistant coaches in Thad and Garrett? I don't know, man. I think guys just like the Thad stuff. My assumption, if Thad or his family listened to this, my apologies. My assumption was that Thad was going to have his $8 million guarantee or his $8 million contract not like they weren't going to accept that, and they'd give him the $1 million payout. It so happened that the Raptors, the way the season went, tried in the summer to alter their roster, and guaranteeing Thad's $8 million made him really, really good as salary filler. $8 million into a trade means a lot more than $8 million expiring means a lot more than $1 million, for example, or just nothing really. And Garrett, I think Garrett, big shout out to Garrett. He donated money to the teachers union, right? In Toronto. And he was there like picketing with them. Isn't that what he did? If I'm misremembering, my bad, but he's worth like the 3.5 million or whatever just for that, for the pro labor messaging. But yeah, I don't want to count pockets, right? These guys, they play, they get paid, they've collectively bargained for this. And I don't think that Thad's contract or Garrett Temple's contract is the wall to the Raptors' impact that they want or anything like that. Yeah, as you say, Nesta, Thad's 8 plus Chris's 11 is a nice salary ballast for getting some guard help. Yeah, and I think Chris, at least I know over the past couple trade deadlines, this wasn't reported that much, but he has had not a considerable amount, I wouldn't say, but he's had interest from a number of teams, kind of like a spark plug big that they might look to get in, around the trade deadline. It hasn't happened. It's hard to make trades in the NBA, but yeah. Daniel Brody says Yak should be bringing more value defensively, though. I never thought he was an all-defense type guy, but I have a hard time saying he's better defensively than like Gafford, Bataze, Mark Williams. Yeah, I talked about this a little bit earlier, and we saw it in this game too, that Jakob, his impact on defense is very closely tied to the point of attack defense, because Jakob can't really access the switching schemes that like Precious or McDaniels or Scotty or Pascal or OG can, right? So point of attack defense really affects bigs who play below the level of the screen. That's just always going to be such a big deal. And it's tough that Jakob can't like override that and give a bunch of impact. It's tough to see him, even with all that said, in positions where he can win battles against centers like Luke Cornett, and he ends up, losing some of them, or like Walker Kessler, or like Mark Williams when they play the Hornets. Jakob is playing well below his expected impact. He's playing below his expected level. That's been too tough, man. And this also, this is a team that is trying to find something desperately. They switched the starting lineup, and the new starting lineup is still bad. Still bad. The starting lineup was bad before, and the starting lineup has been bad since. I think that this was my worry, and I still wanted them to try it, because now that they're losing, at least they're losing with more usage for Scotty. At least they're losing with more usage for Pascal, and they get to try a few different things. And I think it will, not in this game, but in the future, lead to more usage for OG, moving towards a more wing-oriented offense by changing that. Instead of having a guy like Dennis initiating a bunch, you have a guy like Gary Trent Jr. who's supposed to finish plays. But also packaged into that is the fact that Gary has been well below his level this season. A guy just got a promotion despite not playing well. And in a game, he played well last game, but he goes 2 for 10 tonight. He's a guard who hardly gives you any extra ball handling ability. No playmaking reads from this guy. That's tough, man. You want to be able to elevate guys into the starting lineup, not demote guys from it. It's tough. It's very tough. OR asks, where did Masai come up with the top 10 center in the NBA title? I kind of looked at that when they re-signed Poeltl. Based on his impact of last season, it seemed like he was probably hanging around 14 to 18. And you'd have to be really, I don't know, optimistic to bump him towards 10 to 12 or 9 to 12. I think that Masai has said a few things over the past couple of years that I don't think are accurate representations of the team. Anunoby says he's closer to a bottom 10 center. I disagree. There's a lot of centers in the league, man. You were not even thinking about the third string center. You're not thinking about James Wiseman. You're not thinking about Marvin Bagley. You know, he's better than a lot of guys, but he also gets hit a lot. So there's expectations. Another loss, man. I don't know. I wonder what happens at the trade deadline. I'm not necessarily waiting for the trade deadline, but I do wonder what happens at the trade deadline. I wonder so much. And this team has been in flux, will be in flux, and them's the breaks, man. It's a tough league. There's a lot of really intelligent people making decisions about how to build teams. There's a lot of like scouting, team building, cap considerations. Teams have really elevated themselves as decision makers over the course of the past however many years. It's harder to get a leg up on these guys. It's harder to make, it's the path to being a good middle of the road team is harder now than it used to be. You can't just like pay guys and keep it moving and do all that kind of stuff. You have to be intentional to be good, and you have to be really, really smart, and you have to be really lucky to be very, very good. And Scotty Barnes going into the future is like a big part of being very, very good. I really wonder, how this team looks going forward and all that kind of stuff. With all that said, another loss. I'll be here after the Pistons game if they win or if they lose. And then as far as like weekly podcast type stuff, myself and Trey will be back in the saddle for the first time since my incident to record a podcast. And I think we'll be talking, just based on what Trey has liked talking to me about lately, I think that we'll be talking a decent amount of trade cannon fodder, all that kind of stuff. So I'll probably, for those people who follow me on Twitter, I'll put out a tweet, stay tuned, asking for fake or like prospective trades. So we can kind of go through that and say whether we think they're good or bad, just as a heads up. But yep, another loss. Your Raptors lose again. Good Lord. Nesta says Buddy Hield. Whew, I want that guy bad. I've wanted him for years. Same with Malik Monk. It's kind of funny how guys stay in your brain for so long. I know I wasn't one of the Kenneth Faried people, but Kenneth Faried was in the Raptors collective consciousness forever. And yeah, Buddy Hield has been in my collective conscious for years. Thanks to everybody for listening. As always, the people in the chat, thank you for being insightful, engaging, and kind. And you guys always make this way easier, because when I just talk to myself, it's like tough to do 15 minutes. But when you guys ask questions, piece of cake to go longer. And everyone seems to like the longer stuff. So thank you to everybody for tuning in. Make sure to like the video. It's free, and it helps spread the stuff to other people who want to watch this stuff. And if you have the means, holiday season type thing, and you like my work, you can support it by going to raptorsrepublic.com, subscribing, and that helps support myself, obviously, but it supports a litany of writers who are trying to get into the industry without doing the, in my opinion, predatory intern plus whatever situation. Raptors Republic pays its workers. Raptors Republic does it as an independent outlet. And the reason why we get to do that is because of fantastic people who pay for what they, go for online. That's what I do. I'm not holding you guys to a different standard. When I like something, I pay for it. That seems to be the only way to make sure people who do work on the internet actually get to keep doing it. Okay, sermon over. Thank you to everybody. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day, and goodbye.